In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and vast fields of golden wheat, there stood an old high school known as Maplewood Academy. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a typical building with faded paint, creaky floors, and classrooms filled with rows of desks that had seen better days. But what made this place special was its annual talent show, a tradition older than most of the teachers themselves. Every year, students would gather on stage to sing, dance, act, or play instruments, hoping to earn applause from their peers and maybe even take home the coveted trophy for best performance. For many, it was the highlight of the school. This year, however, something unusual happened. Among the usual crowd of eager participants, one name stood out: Marcus Johnson. Marcus was a junior, tall and lanky with dark brown skin and curly hair he always kept neatly trimmed. He wasn't particularly popular. In fact, he preferred staying under the radar. Most people didn't know much about him except that he spent his lunch breaks reading books in the library or sketching quietly in the corner of the art room. What they definitely didn't know was that Marcus could play the piano like no one else. Marcus had been playing since he was 6 years old, thanks to his grandmother who taught him how to read sheet music before he could even tie his shoes. She used to say, "Music is magic, Marcus. It can heal hearts and change minds." Those words stuck with him throughout his childhood, and over the years he practiced tirelessly, mastering everything from classical compositions to jazz improvisations. Yet despite his incredible skill, Marcus rarely shared his gift with others. At school he never mentioned it, let alone played in front of anyone. So when news spread that Marcus had signed up for the talent show and planned to perform on the grand piano, the reaction was skeptical, to say the least. It started innocently enough. A few students whispered jokes about whether Marcus could actually play or if he'd just bang randomly on the keys. Then came the teachers. During a staff meeting in the faculty lounge, Mr. Peterson, the history teacher, leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "Did you hear? Marcus Johnson is going to play piano at the talent show," he said, raising an eyebrow. Mrs. Dawson, the math teacher, laughed nervously. "Well, I hope he doesn't break the keys," she replied, earning giggles from the others around the table. Though they thought it was harmless teasing, their words traveled quickly through the grapevine, reaching Marcus's ears by the end of the day. When Marcus heard about the comments, he felt a sharp pang in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd faced doubt because of his race. Growing up, he'd often been told he didn't fit certain stereotypes, like when kids assumed he was good at basketball simply because of his height, or when adults questioned why he liked reading instead of sports. But this was different. This was about something deeply personal, something he poured his heart into every single day. Still, Marcus refused to let their words get to him. Instead, he channeled his frustration into determination. "They'll see," he muttered to himself as he walked home after school, clutching his backpack tightly. "They'll see." The days leading up to the talent show were tense. Rumors swirled about what Marcus might, or might not, be able to do. Some students eagerly awaited his performance, curious to see if the rumors were true. Others openly mocked him, calling him grandma's pianist behind his back. Even some of the judges for the talent show seemed unsure, whispering among themselves during rehearsals. But Marcus remained unfazed. Each afternoon he stayed late after school to practice in the empty auditorium. Sitting alone at the grand piano, he ran through his chosen piece again and again until his fingers moved without hesitation. He knew exactly what he wanted to play. Clair de Lune, a hauntingly beautiful composition by Debussy that required both technical precision and emotional depth. To Marcus, it was more than just a song. It was a story, one he hoped would speak louder than any insult ever could. As the date of the talent show drew closer, anticipation built within the school. Posters advertising the event lined the hallways, and students buzzed excitedly about who might win. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his preparations in solitude. On the morning of the big day, he woke up early, dressed carefully in a suit borrowed from his older brother, and headed to school with a calm demeanor that masked the storm of nerves inside him. When he arrived, the auditorium was already bustling with activity. Performers rehearsed last-minute adjustments while volunteers arranged chairs and tested microphones. Amidst all the chaos, Marcus found a quiet spot backstage, where he sat, silently, replaying scales in his mind and visualizing every note he would soon play. Little did anyone know, the seeds of transformation had already been planted. By signing up for the talent show, Marcus had unknowingly set off a chain reaction, one that would challenge assumptions, inspire awe, and leave an indelible mark on everyone present. As the lights dimmed and the audience settled into their seats, no one could have predicted the impact a single performance would have, not just on Marcus, but on the entire community. All they knew was that something extraordinary was about to unfold, and when Marcus finally stepped onto the stage, the world held its breath. The morning of the talent show dawned bright and clear, with sunlight streaming through the windows of Maplewood Academy. Students buzzed with excitement as they hurried down the hallways, discussing who would perform what and speculating about the winners. Posters advertising the event decorated nearly every wall, their bold letters proclaiming, "Tonight's the night." But for Marcus Johnson, the day felt longer than usual. Every step he took seemed heavier, every sound louder, as if the entire universe was conspiring to remind him of what awaited him that evening. By lunchtime, the chatter had reached a fever pitch. In the cafeteria, groups of students gathered around tables, laughing and debating which acts would stand out. Some names were mentioned more than others, like Emily Carter, the star singer of the school choir, or Jake Thompson, whose energetic dance routines always drew applause. Then someone brought up Marcus. At first, there were snickers. "Oh yeah, Marcus is playing piano," one student said mockingly, mimicking clumsy hand movements on an imaginary keyboard. Others joined in, giggling and making jokes about how the stage might collapse under the weight of his performance. Even some teachers seated nearby exchanged amused glances, though none dared to laugh openly now that the event was so close. Marcus sat alone at a corner table, picking at his sandwich without much appetite. He could hear the whispers, feel the eyes darting in his direction. Part of him wanted to shrink into invisibility, to disappear completely. But another part, the stronger part, reminded him why he was doing this. This wasn't just about proving people wrong. It was about sharing something he loved deeply, something that had shaped him over years of practice and patience. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. "Music is magic, Marcus. Let it speak for you." Taking a deep breath, Marcus pushed away the negativity and focused on the task ahead. After lunch, rehearsals began in earnest. The auditorium was a flurry of activity, with performers running through their routines while volunteers adjusted lighting and tested microphones. Backstage, Marcus waited quietly, observing the chaos with calm detachment. Around him, other participants fidgeted nervously, adjusting costumes or rehearsing lines under their breath. Emily practiced her scales near a mirror, her face flushed, with concentration. Jake stretched his legs, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Everyone seemed confident, prepared, and eager to shine. Yet when Marcus stepped forward to take his turn at the piano, the room fell silent. He walked onto the stage slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly against the wooden floor. The spotlight caught him, casting a warm glow over his suit and for a moment, all eyes were on him, not with admiration, but with curiosity mixed with skepticism. Marcus ignored the stares and sat down at the grand piano, positioning himself carefully. As his fingers hovered above the keys, he closed his eyes and let the noise fade away. All that remained was the music in his head, waiting to be released. His rehearsal went smoothly, though no one clapped afterward. Instead, there were murmurs, some polite, others dismissive. "Not bad," one teacher remarked half-heartedly, while another shrugged and muttered, "We'll see how it goes tonight." Marcus didn't linger to hear their comments. He returned backstage, where he spent the rest of the afternoon going over his piece again and again in his mind. Each time he replayed it, he imagined the audience sitting silently, captivated by the melody flowing from his fingertips. As evening approached, the atmosphere shifted. Parents began arriving, filling the parking lot with cars and the auditorium with chatter. Inside, ushers guided guests to their seats while volunteers made final preparations. Performers huddled backstage, whispering last-minute reminders to each other. Marcus stayed apart from the group, sitting cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed. He visualized every note, every pause, every crescendo. His heart raced, but his breathing remained steady. When the MC finally announced the start of the show, Marcus stood up, straightened his tie, and took his place among the lineup. The performances began, and the energy in the room was electric. Emily opened with a powerful rendition of a popular ballad, earning loud cheers from the crowd. Jake followed with an energetic hip-hop routine that left everyone clapping and whistling. Other acts ranged from comedic skits to heartfelt poetry readings, each met with enthusiastic applause. But as the evening wore on, anticipation grew. Everyone knew Marcus was next, and the tension in the air was palpable. When the MC called his name, "And now, please welcome Marcus Johnson to the stage." The auditorium erupted into scattered laughter and murmurs. Some students leaned over to whisper sarcastic remarks like, "This should be interesting," while teachers exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus stepped onto the stage, his presence commanding silence almost immediately. The spotlight illuminated him, highlighting the determination etched into his features. He approached the piano bench with deliberate steps, adjusted the microphone slightly, and took a deep breath. For a moment, the entire room froze. All eyes were fixed on him, waiting, wondering. Marcus placed his hands gently on the keys, closed his eyes, and began to play. The first note rang out, soft yet resonant, silencing even the faintest whisper. What followed was nothing short of breathtaking. His fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace, weaving a melody so intricate and emotional that it felt otherworldly. It wasn't just music, it was storytelling. Each chord painted vivid images, evoking feelings of joy, sorrow, triumph, and longing. The piece he chose, Clair de Lune, demanded technical mastery, yet Marcus played it effortlessly, as if the piano itself were an extension of his soul. Slowly, jaws dropped and eyes widened. The once doubtful teachers sat rigid in their seats, unable to look away. Students who had mocked him earlier leaned forward, mesmerized. By the time Marcus reached the crescendo, the entire auditorium was holding its collective breath. When the final note lingered in the air, the silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the world had paused to process what they had just witnessed. And in that moment, Marcus proved that true talent doesn't need words to defend itself. It speaks for itself loud and clear. The moment Marcus placed his hands on the piano keys, the atmosphere in the auditorium shifted. It was as though a wave of calm washed over the room, silencing every whisper, every shuffle of feet, every creak of chairs. His fingers hovered for a fraction of a second, and then they moved. The first note rang out, a soft, delicate sound that seemed to hang in the air like a single drop of rain falling into still water. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried a weight that immediately demanded attention. Everyone froze. At first, no one dared to breathe. The audience didn't know what to expect. Some had come prepared to laugh or snicker if Marcus stumbled. Others simply assumed this would be another forgettable act in the lineup. But as the melody began to unfold, those expectations crumbled. Each note flowed seamlessly into the next, creating a tapestry of sound so intricate and beautiful that it felt almost otherworldly. Marcus's choice of Clair de Lune, a piece known for its complexity and emotional depth, was bold, and he played it with such mastery that even seasoned musicians would have been impressed. As the music swelled, the crowd became entranced. Every chord painted vivid pictures in their minds: moonlight dancing on a quiet lake, leaves rustling softly in the breeze, waves gently lapping against the shore. It was storytelling without words, emotion conveyed purely through sound. For the teachers who had mocked him earlier, the performance hit especially hard. Mrs. Dawson, the math teacher who joked about Marcus breaking the keys, found herself gripping the edge of her seat, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Mr. Peterson, the history teacher, leaned forward, his arms crossed tightly across his chest as if trying to hold back tears. Even students who had teased Marcus during lunch were now completely silent, their faces reflecting awe and guilt in equal measure. Marcus, however, remained focused. He sat perfectly upright at the piano, his shoulders relaxed but steady, his expression calm yet intense. To anyone watching, it looked as though he weren't just playing the instrument. He was becoming one with it. His fingers danced across the keys with effortless grace, hitting each note with precision and feeling. There was no hesitation, no stumble. Every movement was deliberate, every pause perfectly timed. It was clear that this wasn't something he'd learned overnight. It was the result of years of dedication, countless hours spent practicing late into the night when everyone else was asleep. About halfway through the piece, Marcus reached the crescendo, a section filled with soaring arpeggios and cascading chords that required both technical skill and raw emotion. As his hands moved faster and the music grew louder, the energy in the room intensified. People leaned forward in their seats, holding their breaths as if afraid to miss a single note. Parents who had come to support their own children forgot, momentarily, whose act they were there to see. Friends nudged each other, wide-eyed, pointing toward the stage. Even the MC, standing off to the side near the curtains, stopped scrolling through his phone and stared, transfixed. When the final notes of the crescendo faded away, the music transitioned into a softer, more introspective passage. Here Marcus slowed down, allowing the melody to linger, giving the audience time to absorb what they had just experienced. The contrast between the two sections was striking. One moment explosive and powerful, the next tender and vulnerable. It was as if Marcus was taking them on a journey, guiding them through peaks of triumph and valleys of reflection. By the time he reached the end of the piece, the entire auditorium was utterly spellbound. And then, it was over. The last note hung in the air, trembling ever so slightly before fading into silence. For several seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sounds were the faint hum of the lights overhead and the distant ticking of a clock somewhere backstage. Marcus sat motionless, his hands resting lightly on the keys, his head bowed slightly as if in prayer. The spotlight illuminated him, casting long shadows across the stage. He looked neither proud nor humble, just peaceful, as though he had accomplished exactly what he set out to do. Backstage, the other performers exchanged stunned glances. Emily Carter, the star singer who had opened the show with her powerful ballad, whispered to Jake Thompson, "I didn't know he could play like that." Jake nodded slowly, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by genuine admiration. Even the volunteers and crew members who rarely paid attention to individual acts stood rooted in place, unable to look away. Then, slowly, the spell broke. A single pair of hands began to clap. It was Mrs. Thompson, the choir director, who had been sitting near the front row. Her applause started hesitantly but quickly grew louder, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She had always believed in the transformative power of music, but she had never expected to witness something so profound in her own school's talent show. Others followed suit. First, a few scattered claps, then more, until the entire auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. Students jumped to their feet, whistling and shouting, while parents cheered enthusiastically from the back rows. Teachers joined in too, some wiping away tears, others nodding in silent acknowledgement of Marcus's brilliance. Marcus finally stood up from the piano bench, bowing slightly to acknowledge the applause. His face betrayed little emotion, no triumphant grin, no smug smirk. Instead, he offered a small, polite smile, his eyes scanning the crowd briefly before he turned and walked off stage. As he disappeared behind the curtain, the cheering continued, growing even louder. Backstage, performers rushed to congratulate him, patting him on the back and shaking his hand. "That was insane," one girl exclaimed. "How did you learn to play like that?" Marcus shrugged modestly, saying nothing. He didn't need to. His performance had already said everything. For many in the audience, the impact of what they had just witnessed went beyond mere entertainment. It was a lesson, a reminder that assumptions can be dangerous, that talent often hides where you least expect it, and that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most profound messages. As the MC returned to the microphone to announce the next act, the buzz in the room was electric. Conversations erupted everywhere, with people raving about Marcus's performance and speculating about how he managed to pull it off. Meanwhile, backstage, Marcus slipped quietly into a corner, avoiding the spotlight once again. He knew the real work wasn't done yet, not until the judges announced the winners, but for now, he allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. He had proven them wrong, not with words, but with music, and in doing so, he had changed something far greater than just the outcome of a high school talent show. The applause didn't stop immediately. It swelled and echoed, filling the auditorium like a tidal wave crashing against the walls. People clapped until their hands stung, cheered until their voices grew hoarse, and whistled until the sound reverberated through the rafters. Marcus's performance had left an indelible mark on everyone present, but what followed next was perhaps even more powerful than the music itself. A profound, almost sacred silence. As the noise began to die down, the MC stepped back onto the stage, visibly struggling to regain control of the room. "Wow," he said into the microphone, his voice trembling slightly. That was incredible." The audience murmured in agreement, still buzzing, with excitement. But when the MC tried to introduce the next act, there was a noticeable shift in the energy. Some students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged guilty glances. Even the teachers seemed distracted, unable to focus fully on what came after Marcus. Backstage, the other performers were equally shaken. Emily Carter, who had opened the show with her soaring ballad, stood frozen near the wings, staring at the empty piano bench as though it held some kind of secret. Jake Thompson, whose high-energy dance routine usually brought the house down, now looked uncertain about whether to take the stage. "How are we supposed to follow that?" he muttered under his breath, earning nods from those around him. For the first time in years, the talent show felt less like a competition and more like a shared experience, one that none of them would soon forget. Marcus, meanwhile, remained calm and composed. He sat quietly in a corner backstage, sipping water from a small bottle and avoiding eye contact with anyone who approached him. Though he appreciated the praise, he wasn't seeking validation. What mattered most to him was the music, the way it flowed through him and connected with others. Still, he couldn't help but notice the change in how people treated him. Students who had previously ignored him now greeted him warmly, asking questions about his musical journey. Teachers who had doubted him earlier avoided meeting his gaze. Altogether, their faces flushed with embarrassment. When the final act concluded and the judges retired to deliberate, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew Marcus had delivered the standout performance of the night, but no one dared say it aloud. Not yet. Parents whispered excitedly in the aisles, speculating about who might win. Performers paced nervously backstage, rehearsing acceptance, speeches in their heads. And through it all, Marcus waited patiently, his expression unreadable. Finally, the MC returned to the stage, holding a sealed envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming over the microphone, "it is my honor to announce the winner of this year's talent show." The crowd erupted into cheers, leaning forward in anticipation. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the suspense build before continuing. "In third place," the names rolled off his tongue quickly, eliciting polite applause. Then came second place, which went to Emily Carter. She beamed as she accepted her trophy, though her smile faltered slightly when she glanced toward Marcus. Finally, the moment arrived. "And in first place," the MC declared, opening the envelope. With a flourish, "The winner is Marcus Johnson." For a split second, the room fell silent again. Then, as if a dam had burst, the audience leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering louder than ever before. Marcus rose slowly from his seat backstage, looking surprised but not overly shocked. As he walked onto the stage to accept his trophy, the spotlight illuminated him once more, casting a golden glow over his figure. He shook hands with the judges, thanked the MC, and raised the gleaming trophy above his head, earning another round of thunderous applause. But the real drama unfolded moments later, as Marcus made his way off stage. Near the exit, a group of teachers huddled together, whispering anxiously. When they spotted Marcus approaching, one of them, Mrs. Dawson, the same math teacher who had joked about him breaking the keys, stepped forward hesitantly. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together as if she were bracing herself for rejection. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. You were absolutely incredible tonight." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. For a moment he simply stared, his dark eyes searching hers. Then, without saying a word, he nodded once, a gesture that conveyed both forgiveness and understanding. It wasn't anger or resentment he felt. It was relief. Relief that he had proven himself, not just to them, but to himself, without another word. He continued walking, leaving the teachers standing awkwardly in his wake. Word of Marcus's victory spread quickly beyond the school walls. By the next morning, videos of his performance had been uploaded to social media, where they quickly went viral. Comments poured in from strangers across the country, praising his skill and sharing stories of their own struggles with prejudice and doubt. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing Marcus the quiet prodigy and inviting him to perform at community events. Suddenly, he was everywhere, in newspapers, on TV screens, and even in conversations at coffee shops and grocery stores. At school, things changed too. Students who had once teased him now sought him out, eager to learn more about his passion for music. Teachers treated him with newfound respect, offering to mentor him and encouraging him to pursue opportunities outside the classroom. During lunch breaks, Marcus could often be found surrounded by classmates asking questions about his techniques or requesting impromptu performances. For someone who had always preferred solitude, the sudden attention was overwhelming, but also heartwarming. Yet despite the fame and recognition, Marcus remained grounded. In interviews, he credited his success to hard work and dedication, emphasizing that anyone could achieve greatness with enough effort. "Music isn't about being perfect," he told a reporter during one such interview. "It's about telling your story and connecting with others. If I can inspire even one person to believe in themselves, then I've done my job." Over time, the incident became a turning point not just for Marcus, but for the entire Maplewood Academy community. Conversations about prejudice and assumptions gained momentum, leading to workshops and initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity. Teachers began incorporating discussions about bias into their lesson plans, while students organized clubs focused on celebrating diversity. The talent show itself evolved, becoming less about competition and more about collaboration, a testament to the power of art to unite people from all walks of life. Years later, when alumni returned for reunions, they still talked about the night Marcus silenced the skeptics. To many, it was more than just a memory. It was a lesson, a reminder that true talent knows no boundaries and that sometimes the loudest statement is made in perfect silence. And though Marcus eventually pursued a career outside of music, dedicating himself to teaching and mentoring young artists, his legacy lived on. Every time a student sat down at a piano or picked up an instrument for the first time, they carried a piece of Marcus's story with them, a story of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of belief. The days that followed Marcus's stunning performance at the talent show felt surreal, not just for him, but for everyone at Maplewood Academy. The once quiet student who had been mocked and underestimated was now the talk of the town. His name appeared in local newspapers. His face flashed across TV screens and his music echoed through social media platforms as videos of his performance continued to rack up views and comments. Yet amidst all the attention, Marcus remained remarkably humble. He didn't seek out interviews or bask in the spotlight. Instead, he carried himself with the same quiet dignity that had defined him long before anyone knew about his extraordinary talent. At school, life changed dramatically for both Marcus and those around him. Students who had previously dismissed him as just another kid now greeted him warmly, asking questions about his journey and expressing admiration for his skill. Some even admitted they'd been wrong to doubt him. their apologies sincere, if a little awkward. Teachers, too, approached him differently. Gone were the dismissive remarks and skeptical glances. In their place was genuine respect and curiosity. Mrs. Dawson, the math teacher who had joked about Marcus breaking the piano keys, became one of his biggest supporters, often stopping by after class to chat about his future plans and offering encouragement whenever she could. For Marcus, these interactions were bittersweet. On one hand, he appreciated the newfound acceptance and respect. On the other, he couldn't help but wonder why it had taken something so dramatic, a public display of his talent, to earn it. He understood that people weren't perfect, that everyone made mistakes, but the memory of their earlier mockery lingered like a faint scar. Still, Marcus chose to focus on the positive. If his performance had opened doors not just for him, but for others like him, then perhaps it had been worth it. As the weeks went by, Marcus began to notice subtle changes within the school community. Conversations about prejudice and assumptions started happening more openly, in classrooms, hallways, and even during staff meetings. Inspired by Marcus's story, some teachers introduced lessons on bias and inclusivity into their curriculums, using his experience as a real-life example of how harmful stereotypes could be. Students formed clubs dedicated to celebrating diversity, hosting events where they shared stories, art, and music from different cultures. Even the annual talent show underwent a transformation, shifting its focus from competition to collaboration. Performers were encouraged to support one another, rather than view each other as rivals, fostering a sense of unity that had been missing in previous years. Marcus played a key role in this cultural shift, though he never sought recognition for it. When asked to speak at assemblies or lead workshops, he agreed without hesitation, sharing his love for music and urging others to embrace their passions regardless of what others might think. "Don't let fear or doubt stop you," he would say, his voice steady and calm. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone except yourself. Just keep going because you never know who might need to hear your story." His words resonated deeply, especially among younger students who looked up to him as a role model. Many began exploring their own interests, whether it was painting, writing, dancing, or playing instruments, with renewed confidence. Some even joined Marcus in practicing music, forming a small ensemble that performed at school events and community gatherings. Together, they created something beautiful, blending their unique talents into harmonious melodies that left audiences spellbound. Despite the growing acclaim, Marcus never lost sight of what truly mattered to him: the music itself. While others celebrated his achievements, he spent hours alone in the auditorium, experimenting with new pieces and refining old ones. To him, success wasn't measured in trophies or applause. It was found in the joy of creating something meaningful, something that connected with others on a deeper level. And connect it did. Whether he was performing for a packed auditorium or teaching a beginner how to play their first scale, Marcus's passion inspired those around him to dream bigger and work harder. Eventually, graduation day arrived, marking the end of Marcus's time at Maplework Academy. As he stood on stage wearing his cap and gown, listening to the principal announce his name, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. 4 years ago, he had been an invisible figure in the background, content to blend into the crowd. Now he was leaving behind a legacy of resilience, courage, and unwavering belief in oneself. When he received his diploma, the entire audience rose to their feet, applauding loudly as if to say, "Thank you for showing us what's possible." After graduation, Marcus chose not to pursue a career in professional music. Instead, he decided to become a teacher, dedicating himself to helping young people discover and nurture their talents. He believed that every child deserved the chance to shine, just as he had, and he wanted to be the kind of mentor he wished he'd had growing up. Over the years, he touched countless lives, guiding students through challenges and cheering them on as they achieved their goals. Many of them went on to accomplish great things, crediting Marcus with giving them the confidence to believe in themselves. Even decades later, when former students returned to visit Maplewood Academy, they still spoke fondly of Mr. Johnson, the quiet man with a big heart who had taught them that talent knows no boundaries. Alumni reunions often featured performances by past students, many of whom had gone on to careers in music, theater, or other creative fields. Each time someone took the stage, they acknowledged Marcus's influence, thanking him for believing in them when no one else did. And yet, despite all the accolades and memories, Marcus's greatest achievement wasn't fame or recognition. It was the ripple effect of his actions, the way his courage had sparked change not only in himself but in others. Because of him, teachers learned to see beyond surface-level judgments. Because of him, students discovered the power of self-expression. And because of him, Maplewood Academy became a place where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. Looking back on his life, Marcus often thought about the night of the talent show, the night he silenced the skeptics and proved that true greatness doesn't require words to defend itself. That moment had been transformative, not just for him but for an entire community. It reminded people that assumptions can be dangerous, that talent often hides where you least expect it, and that sometimes the loudest statement is made in perfect silence. For Marcus, that lesson was worth more than any trophy or standing ovation. It was a reminder that music and life isn't about perfection. It's about connection. And in connecting with others, Marcus had done something truly extraordinary. He had changed the world, one note at a time.